Hello, Nicole. I am here marking your paper and thank you for sending it in. It does sound like you've got quite the busy week. I'm recording on a different apparatus, and if I look in the wrong place, my apologies. Now, if at the end my explanation is not such that you really understand everything I've said, I want you to email me and I will send you the PDF that I have marked. But I would like you to go through with a red pen first to see if you can understand everything from what my verbal is. Just because I think if you can do it that way, it will really sink in. And then I will also say to you, please don't be worried about the errors you make this week or during next week's lesson, because I usually find that people really keep these in mind at the actual exam, and as such, they end up with their mark going up. I've mentioned that often people do 10% better at the exam, and that's why they keep in mind the errors that they've made in the last few weeks. Now, I also encourage people at this point to actually set aside the last 4 weeks of exams and start a list of the errors I've made. So you would have an area called melody, figured bass, chorale, functional analysis, and oh my word, structural analysis. I couldn't remember the word structural. Duh. And then I find that if you make a list of, okay, that was my error, and then if that error comes up again in the next paper, don't write it down again. Put a check mark by it, meaning that it happened again. I find that if you see X's, it's kind of frustrating. So put check marks. And then at the end, if you have 2 or 3 things that have several check marks, you know those are your pitfalls that are repetitive errors that you need to, at the exam, sit down and say, okay, at the top of my melody paper, melody question, I'm going to write the words, not that this is you, repeated notes, accidentals, and upbeats. And so for some people, they don't get the accidentals in. They don't remember to phrase their upbeats or include them, and things like that. So each list is different. That's why I don't send it out, because it's supposed to be unique to you and part of your studying process. And then the night before your exam, you want to read through this so that you just sort of go, okay, those are the things I don't want to do. And then you feel like you have had something to study, because sometimes it's really hard to know what to study in these cases. So here we go with the melody writing. Now, one of the things that I would actually say for everybody to write down as one of the elements in the melody writing is be contour aware. So when you're looking at this, yes, you're doing fabulous at writing in your intervals. You don't have to write that down for you. But beyond that, you need to actually look to see where the changes of directions are in the melody, and then make sure you keep that as a characteristic of this piece. For instance, in the given minuet, the first thing that I noticed is that in bar 1 and 3, the treble line has essentially a broken triad, but it does not go up, up, or down, down. There is, in both cases, a change of direction in the middle. That is a characteristic that needs to be maintained. When you look at this, when you're looking at the contour, you evaluate, okay, what is the biggest leap? So that's something that I should keep in mind. A, I should make sure that each one of my phrases has a leap, and B, that I pretty much stay with that. Now, if you have a leap of a sixth, I will say in your second last bar, which is considered the penultimate bar leading to the final hoo-ha cadence, then you could expand that to an octave, because it would be for a climactic reason. But otherwise, If the biggest leap is a sixth in the given line, that's what it should be where you are. And we should also notice what kind of range we have. The range in this given was an octave for that phrase. So I'm just going to continue talking about phrase shape for a moment and look at your whole paper, well, your whole question with regards to that. So in phrase 2, when we look at your lowest note to your highest note, it's F sharp to D, and that means your range is a sixth. So if it's possible to get it a little bit closer to the octave, that would be ideal. And barring that, when I look at the eighth notes in the given line, every one of them moves by step, which means your eighth note should move by step. And I'm noticing in bar 6, you have a skip in the treble, and that actually causes hidden fifths because you went to a fifth in similar motion. So remember that going in similar motion, we don't have to worry about hiddens if the soprano is moving by step. And in your penultimate bar of your A section, we have a range of a third. And leading up to the cadence in the previous, we had a range of a sixth. So I would want to expand that. And the thing that I would say to you is there's clearly two leaps in the given third bar of phrase 1. So I would be trying to get a leap into this bar because it's supposed to be pushing towards that cadence. And I also say to everybody, the second last bar of each section should be the bar that has like the most activity or equal to the most activity. So in bar 7 and 15 and 3 count time, given this opening, I would have had 4 eighths and a quarter or 6 eighth notes to make it push towards that tonic. So then you're saying, well, what would I do here? So your B flat on count 1 makes sense. And I love the progression you have. 2 in first inversion is great. What if you leap up to the E in the soprano? Now that would mean the bass needs to go to the C to avoid hiddens. But if you leap up to the E flat and then in eighth notes, 4 eighth notes in a row, go E flat, D, C, A. So you get the leading tone resolving in that cadence and then over the bar line to B flat. You have as many eighth notes in this bar as any bar previous to it. So with those, I'm talking about your style points, not your accuracy points. You were actually accurate here, but they would have said that your last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes circled. It went A, B, C, B, A, B. If every other note is the same note, it's called circling. So that would be something I would put on my list. Check for circling, because you end up with too narrow of a range and it actually sounding like you've just got a tonic with a bunch of neighbor notes. So that doesn't fit the style of this. Phrase 3, I like your opening. Love the fact that your leading tone resolves to the tonic in B flat over that bar line. And then at the end of that bar, your leading tone of G minor resolves to the tonic over the next bar line. Genius. You can feel free to keep doing that. Now in the next bar, so the third bar of phrase 3, you have a broken triad, but you went up, up, up. So that is uncharacteristic of this particular piece. You need a change in the middle of the bar, even if the middle one went up to the E flat and then count 3 went down to the B flat. That would mean you'd probably go down to the A for the 5 chord in the following bar, but that's okay. It leads into the final phrase fine. And then in your final melody, your rounded binary is very secure. Your second last bar was 3/4 notes, and we need absolutely more activity here. So I would put in the melodic minor and go D, E natural, F sharp up to the A as 4/8 notes and lead down to the G. And you could have even had 6/8 notes by going B flat down to G on 8th notes at the beginning of the bar. And now, with what I've done, the first time that you have 8th notes that do not go by step is at the final cadence, so it's a climactic choice. So in here, you do get your 12 out of 15, so make sure you mark 12 on the left-hand side because the accuracy is there. The only thing that I want to go back to say is that in line 1, bar 2, count 2, that cannot be a 5/4/3 if there's no 7th in this bar. That is a 5/6/4. So, and you're going, is that a legal 6/4? And thank you for asking that. So one of the 6/4 progressions that is used on occasion but not often, which is why we don't spend time on it, is called the arpeggio 6/4. Now you're going to want to take notes on this. So it takes a primary chord, so 1, 4, or 5, and it goes 1, 1, 6, 4, 1, 6, or 4, 4, 6, 4, 4, 6, 5, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. So hang on, where's my camera? It's up there. So an arpeggio 6/4, the big thing, you can use 1, 4, or 5, but you want that 6/4 chord to be in the center so it's pillared by our more stable inversions, and that allows you to actually acknowledge it as an arpeggio 6/4. And again, you're not going to be drawing this, but it can come up in these things. And then in bar 3 of phrase 1, your 6 chord needed to be capital. And there is your melody question. Now, when we go on to the figured bass, this is atypical for you, Nicole. This one was not a pass. You actually, out of the, hang on, you got 80.5, 19.5, so you give yourself a total of 80.5. Out of your 19.5, 9 of those marks were lost in this question. So often you are at 80, 90, and I believe we had one time you were perfect on this. That means the 90% on your final exam is within reach. Yes. So let's see where you went wrong. Okay. 7 diminished 6/5 to 1 in first inversion. You must resolve both tritones in your 7 diminished 7 in contrary motion, creating a doubled third in your 1 in first inversion. If the 1 is in root position, you have the choice of either doubling the third or the root. But when it's resolving to 1 in first inversion, you must double the third. So that would be something to put down on your list. The second thing to put on your list in capital letters is accidentals. So again, you are often really good, but you went from the beginning of this line to the end of this line knowing that there was a modulation and you didn't put any accidentals in for the modulation, and there were 3 chords. The difference between E flat major and A flat major is the addition of D flat. The D flat needed to be in the 2/4/2 chord, the 5/7 chord, and in the 4-3 suspension in the final bar. So this line ended up being 5.5. The other thing that was wrong in bar 3 count 4, you have a doubled leading tone in the bass to the tenor. So your tenor should have been an E flat and moved to the G on count 6 so that you had one G in each 5 chord in bar 3. So you would have had it 7.5 to 8 with the accidentals alone. So that's one of your things. So that was 5.5 out of 10. Your next one is also 5.5 out of 10 for 11 out of 20. So on your Baroque figured bass, your note to yourself is, before you leave this question, count how many accidentals were in the figures and count how many that you wrote. They should be the exact same number. If you have more, you've added something that shouldn't be there. If you've got less, you've missed something. And in this case, what you missed was the tierce to Picardy accidental. You got all the hard ones. The next thing you want to write down is read all instructions. You missed putting the root quality chord symbol on the last 3 chords, and that was a 1.5 marks. That would have put that up to 70%. So that's an error of omission, and usually my Nicoles are really good at checking their work when they are at the exam. They don't just trot out after they've finished the first go, and you find that. So that was something. Now, another thing that you want to write down is for root quality chord symbols, always draw out your triad and your seventh to determine what kind of triad and what kind of seventh it is, because that will always give you the accurate root quality chord symbol. For instance, on the downbeat of bar 3, we have F sharp, A, C sharp, E. F sharp, A, C sharp is a minor triad. F sharp to E is a minor seventh. Therefore, this would be F sharp minor 7. The next thing for Nicole to write down on her things to remember list is when you have a sequence of seventh chords in root position, every seventh must resolve. Well, all sevenths must resolve all the time. But in this case, the only way to have that happen is to alternate between complete and incomplete chords. So here, your B7, we needed to not have an F sharp. You take out that F sharp and you put a B as the middle note of the treble triad, and now your seventh of FACE is falling. And then you would do that at the end of bar 4. You would take out the E and you would put an A in the middle, and now your seventh is falling. And when you do all that, you've also made it so that all of your common tones end up being in the same voice. So this complete incomplete business, and it can be vice versa, incomplete complete, it actually, by doing it, you end up saving yourself from doing a double error. And that is what these things were. So you had missing symbols, one symbol wrong. Your sequence needed to have alternation of complete and complete, and a missing tierce to Picardy. So your total for that one was 11 out of 20. Now, then we go on to your chorale, where you get 28 out of 30. Oh, my word. That is awesome. So let's find the 2 mistakes. Bar 3, count 3. When you look at that, there is no seventh, so you cannot call that 5-4-3. That is a 5-6-4. But 5-6-4 all on its own cannot be a cadence chord. So you either had to change the D to an F to make it into GBDF in the tenor, or you make this into 7 diminished 6 for BDF, and you change the alto to an F. So 5-4-3 of 5-5 or 7 diminished 6 of 5-5 are both considered authentic cadences. Are they strong cadences? No, we could never end any big section this way, but end of first phrase, yeah, totally fine. Good rising resolution in bar 5. Super good choices of chords in bar 7, where you kept in mind that you only had one syllable, but you made sure that you had all sevenths resolving and half notes were in place. Very, very good. You found all the beginnings and endings of your modulation. Good passing 6-4 in bar 13. Lovely. In bar 11, you did exactly what you didn't do in the previous question, where when the 5 in first inversion went to 5 in root position, you added the leading tone back in on count 2 in the tenor. Exactly. So where is your other error? The second last bar. If the second last note of a phrase in the chorale is a half note on the supertonic, you are obligated to 2-6-5, 5-7-1 with these two chords as quarter notes. You cannot have a held half note right before the fermata. That's like driving everybody crazy when you're driving and stopping 20 feet back from the stop sign and you can't even see around the corner. So you're going to have to stop again. We don't do that. It's 2-6-5 and 5-7 under there. So now, then your question is, well, what intonation do I do with the A before that? Because if I have a 1 on count 3 of the previous bar, I can't use a 1 there. You're absolutely right, Nicole. That was supposed to be a 4-7 because the 7th was prepared and resolved in the soprano. Finding my camera. That was the progression in the second last bar. Now you're thinking, wow, there was only one thing I could do? Yep. But this 2-6-5-5-7 is something we've been working on since grade 9. Sorry, over here. And that 4-7 is something for grade 10. And no, I don't think it would have worked as a 6-7. And I just said it would have been lovely to have had a 4-3 suspension in the very final bar. So excellent. Just watch that half note on the supertonic. When we go on to your functional chord analysis, we have 13 out of 15. So let's see where this is now. Your second line, I actually wrote very good with an exclamation mark because most people couldn't figure out where to put the modulation, nor did they figure out that in bar 5, they needed a 2 half diminished 4-2 going to a 7 diminished 7 on count 3. You are awesome. That's really good. So let's look at bar 1. In the upbeat on the second eighth note, when we look at this, it's A, C, F sharp, A. There is no dominant there. Therefore, this cannot be called a 5-4-3. It is a 7 diminished 6. In bar 1, count 2, thank you for noticing that the eighth notes added the 7th. Then you put it down as 4-2, but that eighth note was not in the bass voice. It was in the tenor, therefore it shouldn't be a 4-2 inversion. It should have been a 7th root position. And then the hard part. And you did better than most people figuring out something was up on bar 2, count 4, going to bar 3, count 1. So you said that this was 5 of 7. So 7 on the downbeat of bar 3 is F, A, C. 5 of that is CEG, not BDF. And you cannot have a 4 of 7. So what is it that I would recommend here? Now you'll see that every so often I am taking a moment to write something down to clarify what my words are saying. So what we have learned is that if you have 3 Roman numbers, it can be a modulation. So after the fermata, we go to B flat major, count 3 is 1, and then we go into the next bar, and then we have a 5, 8-7, and it goes to a 6. And then that's where, let's see if I can put it up here. You say, I come back to being 1 in G minor, so I can have 1 to 5. So you had to mark a pivot chord here so that this 5 resolved to a chord in this key, and that this acted as something in G minor. So he's a duality. He was a clear double function chord. Most people lost at least 1 mark in this area. So that was your other area. Everything else was good, but again, I say good effort. Then when we go on to our structural analysis, hey, I remembered the word, 16.5 out of 20, so that's an A. In your fugue, you are typically at 4.5 or 5, and lately have been 5. Today is 4.5, and the reason is that when we look at line 3, so bar 6, you have a subject marked into your lowest voice. Well, then you have to look for the counter subject, and it's in the soprano. So count 2 should have been clearly marked as the counter subject. So that was your error of omission. It was a 0.5 deduction. And then for the analysis of the sonatina movement, and I'm just going to let you know, I am going to make a supplementary video to do a couple more sonatina movements, just so that sonata form is more comfortable, because we've seemed to have had a fair amount of compound ternary lately. And one of the things that, because I'm part of the team that writes these exams, or at least have been, I've actually told them no for this year. They only allow 1 of those per year. So that means that the odds are with you, 2 out of 3 of them will be sonata form. It might be rondo form. That's the other option. So I will make sure that I go through a rondo form as well in my supplementary video. I hope to be making that Wednesday or Thursday, so that it's easy for everybody to use that last weekend. Yeah, we're coming down to it. I think you only have homework 1 more week for me. So where did the errors happen? Okay, so you found all of your elements fine. Exposition, development, recapitulation. Key of theme 2A and 2B. The tonic is always identical, always. Now, usually the key is also identical, but it can be that theme 2A is in A major and theme 2B is in A minor, or vice versa. Just going to give you that heads up. But, okay, hang on. I've got my other notes. So let's go forward. So exposition, theme 1, D major, good. Bridge, excellent. Melody went to the left hand distinctively. Theme 2A, I'm going to say excellent. There was a rest in both hands at the end of 18, and there was dolce. When we see dolce in a sonatina, that's a signal that we've got a new theme. Good for you. So you said it was theme 2A in A major because there was G sharps everywhere. You probably noticed there was an E sharp in bar 24, but that was an appoggiatura. Therefore, it didn't change the key. It wasn't a chord tone. Then we look in where you've got theme 2B, and I'm here going, okay, so there was a D sharp in the upbeat, but that was a neighbor note. And we can clearly see in bar 30 that we have a whole passel of Ds that are D natural. So even if you had an election and said majority rules, the D natural wiped out that D sharp. But it was a neighbor tone, therefore this is still A major. And your codetta was well marked. This was a longer codetta than typical, but you found it well. Development excellent. And you remembered that the dominant preparation is leading up to the development. Occasionally you will be asked, although I doubt it, to find a dominant preparation for a theme. It can happen, but sometimes just please read the instructions carefully. Sometimes we say to just label a dominant prep, and then what you've got is correct because you put it clearly in the first bar that it existed. Other times we say having a horizontal line for the complete duration, at which point it would start on count 1 of bar 65, and it would go to the end of bar 72. You just stop the dominant prep horizontal line right before the recapitulation begins. So that's just my heads up. Okay, I'm going to need this again. So then we come to the, hang on. Cadence in 59 to 60. I'm going to scroll back. So you notice the A sharp. Please look at least a couple bars leading up to the cadence. If this is B major, all of the Ds would be sharp. There was only one D sharp. So that means that's an applied chord there. The D in bar 60 was natural. And the A was sharp. Father, Charles. There was no G sharps. The trill in bar 59 is clearly on a G natural. This was an authentic cadence in B minor, not B major. So make sure you've got the major minor tonality bang on. And now we will look at this sequence. So your labeling of your chords was excellent. And yes, you were correct to put in the first inversion on count 2 of each of these bars. So this is my instruction for what to do next when they say name the sequence, and it's in the middle of a piece of music and not so much just in one of like the figured bass things where the chords in the sequence will be just right after each other and pretty clearly what you can see what the sequence is. So the next thing that I do, and I personally do this every single time, is I write down what my root, you can put root quality symbols, but really we just need the root notes. I'm going to take this off for a minute. So the 1 chord is D major, 5 is A major, 6 is B minor, 3 F sharp minor, 4 is G, and 1 is D. So again, you don't have to have those minor signs in because we just need the letters. So then the first thing that you're checking is, are each of these intervals exactly the same? So if they all match up, it's a descending sequence. Whether it's fourths, thirds, fifths, it's a descending sequence. If only every other chord, every other interval matches, then it's an ascending sequence. So I looked at D to A and went, okay, well, D down to A is a fourth. So now what I need to find out is from here to the next one down a fourth, and it is not. A to B is up a second, not down a fourth. Now, if it had been up a fifth, that's still equal to down a fourth, but there was no way you could actually make that match. So as soon as you do that, then you look at your chords in pairs and say, whatever interval this is what I am labeling. So this is an ascending sequence, even though your notes get lower. It's an ascending sequence. Is that not weird? So it's an ascending sequence, and D up to A is a fifth. This is an ascending fifth sequence. D up to A, B up to F sharp, G up to D. So I think that there was lots of little tidbits in there. I would write down what I just said about how to figure out how to find the sequence. So certainly if you have root position, first inversion, root position, first inversion, root position, first inversion, and it's going by step, then you've got either an ascending or descending 5-6 sequence. But when you're dealing with anything that's leaping, what I said today is how you help yourself to not panic when you see what is this sequence. And yes, indeed, this was another one of my papers. So you're in very good shape, Nicole. I do encourage people to actually spend 15 minutes a day in the last week before grade 10 actually studying, practicing writing out their sequences, because the more you write them out, the easier it is to be able to label them. I also recommend making that list that I talked about in the last 4, maybe 6. Don't go back more than 6 papers, because that was long enough ago. We've got those errors under control, and find Nicole's main errors. And I encourage people to actually have that list handy at the final lesson, so that during that lesson, you can see if I say anything new that you should add, so that the night before your exam, you have your study notes complete. And there we go. I hope you have a wonderful week, Nicole. Bye-bye for now.